All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm talking and I'm looking over here to make sure. Yep, I see levels. We've got audio. And hello. All right. This morning we're going to be doing a little bit of philosophical work. We're going to be defining terms to try and get you guys ready for the just pure psychopathy that is going to be the rest of the election cycle. We talked about some of the issues, some of the news items, but guys, I'm here to tell you that as we go forward into this election year, it's going to come at you hard and fast. And one of the things, well, I won't go too deep before we run the intro. Let's go and run the intro. We'll have this conversation. All right, good morning, everybody. Okay, so what I want to work on this morning is a philosophical exercise known as defining terms. So when you're talking about a legitimate debate, right, forming arguments, engaging in a dialogue where you're discussing multiple sides of an issue, and I don't care what the issue is. The issue could be gender politics, or it can be what your favorite flavor of ice cream is. You can't have a productive and intelligent debate without agreeing on terms. And so defining terms is important. And one of the reasons for that, and the Democrats understand this, is they like to play fast and loose with definitions. Their definitions change depending on what it is they want to get you to capitulate to. The gender ideology arguments are a good example, right? The concepts of sex and gender used to just be that you use the word gender when you wanted to talk about the difference between boys and girls with little kids because you didn't want them to get their hands on the word sex and start asking questions about fornication. Right? But of course, we've had some academic abuse of that language over the years, starting with people like John Money, who famously abused a pair of young male twins, and I mean, grossly abused the two of them. John Money's research, where there were two twin baby boys born, and they were both circumcised at birth. Well, one of the two boys, his circumcision was badly butchered, was awful. They essentially burned his penis off instead of just circumcising him. And the parents didn't know what to do about it. John Money reached out to them. and he had the original concept, the original academic idea of gender fluidity and gender identity as something that's distinct from biological sex construct. And so he convinced these parents to raise one of their twin baby boys as a little girl. So this little boy with a badly mutilated penis was raised to believe that he was a little girl. And, periodically, I don't remember all the details off the top of my head, and I won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but because remember we're talking about terms this morning, but periodically they would have the two boys go and meet with John Money and reinforce the idea that the one badly mutilated little boy was a girl. They put him in dresses, they gave him baby dolls, and John Money would write all these academic papers, which we now know to have been fabricated, false. He gave the boys, oh yeah, they're psychologically very healthy, et cetera, et cetera. They both died of committed suicide, by the way. One drug overdose, and one, which I think it's unclear if the male. I think if it's unclear if the one that was raised as a boy killed himself on purpose or was an accidental drug overdose. I'm a little foggy on that issue, but they did both eventually commit suicide. The one who was raised as a girl tried to transition back to being a man because, he basically, when he found out what had been done to him, it was a revelation, like, oh, I've suffered from gender dysphoria my whole life because somebody cut my dick off and put me in a dress without telling me and then lied to me for decades. So that you understand, that is the kind of an extent that the Democrat will go to change the meaning of language so that they can pretend like lies are true and truths are lies. It's a distractionary tactic. It's a mechanism of moving the goalposts so that you can change the target. Right? It's like you've got a terrorist suicide bomber with a magic teleporter. You could solve a suicide bomber with one round, but not if he suddenly stops being there when you squeeze the trigger. It's moving the goalposts, right? Oh God, I caught it at the 1 yard line and ran it all the way back to the other end zone, but the damn field goal sprouted legs and I had to chase the son of a bitch for a marathon. That is what arguing without defined terms is like. It's exhausting, it's fruitless, and it's cartoonishly distracting. So, let's talk about some specific terms that I'm going to want you guys to be ready to deal with going forward. One of them is the deep state. I'm going to talk about this one first because I think it actually needs the least definition to clarify it. But there's a problem with the meaning of the phrase, the deep state, and this is a problem that's created by the left. On the face of it, what people mean when they refer to the deep state is we're referring to unelected politicians, unelected bureaucrats. They're not politicians because they're not elected. Unelected bureaucrats who enjoy substantial political power because of the authority of their position, right? Pitt Danny says the administrative state. Correct. And the reason we refer to the deep state as the administrative state, right, is because these people are put in those positions by elected officials. So shitty politicians get elected, and they may never accomplish anything except for putting key people into key positions. A good example of the danger of the deep state is to take a look at the recent debacle with the ATF and the pistol brace calamity. What happened there is due to the principle of Chevron deference within the legal system, where the presumption is that the politicians, the actual legislatures in the Congress, are not sufficiently expert on particular given minutia, that in deference to the expertise of deep state officials, deep state actors, then it should be that laws are very broad and open-ended, and these bureaucrats, these heads of bureaus, have essentially the authority to enact law, right? They make policy, but those policies are being treated as if they are law. So policy and law are two things that need a little definition to go with them. So I'm going to back up real quick and put that in a bucket. Put a bow on that one. When people refer to the deep state, what you're talking about is that, incontrovertibly, this is not a conspiracy theory. There are people who are not elected, who enjoy essentially interminable tenure in a powerful position within the government, where by the authority of that position, they are able, in effect, to create law without the process of the legislative branch debating and passing the law and sending it on to the executive branch to enact and execute the law. Mr. C mentions NGOs. Yes. And that's a term that I have a particular hatred for. NGOs, non-governmental organizations, because when you talk about NGOs, what you're talking about are pseudo-governmental organizations. They're organizations whose primary function is to influence government activity. Technically, the Brushfire Mind is a non-governmental organization because I am not affiliated with the government. That's why I hate the use of that term in particular. But when you talk about the deep state, I've just described to you the definition. We're referring to the unelected, interminable bureaucrats who essentially enjoy legislative power by default through the practice of Chevron deference. When you mention the deep state, the left will say that we'll try to make it sound like what you're talking about is some grand conspiracy, that the deep state is the same thing as suggesting that the Jews run all the banks, or the Illuminati has taken over the government, or all the politicians you don't like are actually extraterrestrial reptilians wearing fucking stolen skin suits. That's not what the deep state refers to. It refers to a very specific, very well-defined, and very important aspect of our government. That aspect is itself a corrupting influence on the government. Now, let's define distractions. This is another one where the leftist reinterpretation of the term for the purposes of political conversation is abusive of the process of legitimate and intelligent debate. When we say that something is a distraction, it's important to note that that doesn't necessarily entail that it is a distraction which is orchestrated by some grand conspiracy. Now, there are exceptions, except they're not. Here's what I mean. I can say that X, Y, and Z are distractions. X is there's a new top secret security clearance holder who is testifying to Congress about the existence of UFOs that happens to coincide with every major revelation in the Hunter Biden scandal. And that pretty clearly seems to be a feature and not a bug of the Biden corruption scandal. And that story, the UFO story there, is a distraction, which is quite probably orchestrated by a corrupt administration, which we know conclusively and beyond the shadow of a doubt to be in constant communication and collusion with the media apparatus that's projecting that UFO story. And the UFO story is a distraction from something that the conspiracy group wants to distract from. However, I can also point to the story that went viral this weekend where someone made deep fake artificial intelligence pornographic images of Taylor Swift, and that happened. Not the images themselves, although those as well, but the fact that that happened went viral across social media, especially TikTok. And that was a distraction from more important issues. Now, when I say that the Taylor Swift AI story, which I actually want to talk about a little bit, not because I particularly care about Taylor Swift, but it's illustrative of an important phenomenon, but this might be something that I cover tomorrow. But that story is itself a distraction from more important news. That story went trending, covered up Twitter walls over the weekend, at the same time that the Texas border crisis is going on. Right? But there's no reasonable person that's going to suggest that that story was elevated in the way that it was, and I can make this argument with functions of algorithm, but no reasonable person is going to suggest that basically Joe Biden had Elon Musk boost the Taylor Swift AI in the algorithm to get people to stop paying attention to Texas. No, it's more like the whole world went, ooh, shiny titty sprinkles, and stopped thinking about hostile foreign invaders for just about 30 minutes too fucking long over the weekend. So there you have a distraction, which is not necessarily entailing any suggestion that there's an involvement with some deep state conspiracy. Something kind of in the middle. Right now, there's a major border crisis going on, and Texas National Guard is in. Okay, no shots fired. No, we don't have American soldiers and law enforcement killing each other yet, but we do have armed federal agents for border security and customs. CBP, Customs and Border Patrol. we have armed federal agents in at least orders conflict. They have a conflict of mission with the Texas National Guard. So the Texas National Guard has their orders. The CBP has their orders. One of them is acting illegally. And for a moment, we'll pretend like that's an open question and we don't know who's acting illegally. But because please believe, we're going to be talking about that a lot in the future. But that's a huge story right now. And I want to talk about a couple of aspects of it that relate to the culture war and the upcoming elections before we go into the more important. No, almost. I shouldn't say more important. That's a tough call. But before we get into the constitutionality of it, constitutionally, it's a very simple situation. But I'll get to that in a minute. So, in a lot of ways, it's a distraction. In a lot of ways, that activity is a distraction. There's a lot of buzz on social media right now where the Democrats and the lefty talking heads are trying to say, oh, this is all Trump's fault. That's right. They're trying to tell you that the border crisis is Donald Trump's fault. And here's what they're saying. There was a bill in the Senate, and Donald Trump instructed Mitch McConnell to let it die on the floor because Donald Trump wants a border crisis to run on. He's actively pressuring and influencing Republicans in the House and the Senate to not solve the border crisis, and they're even saying this, he's pressuring them not to shut down the border because he wants to be able to run on that. Okay? Let me be very clear about something. Joe Biden does not only have the power, the authority, right now, constitutionally, without changing anything in the law, there doesn't need to be a bill. That's insane. That's a fucking lie. Joe Biden has the authority right now to reenact the Remain in Mexico policy and shut the border down. He has the authority to deploy the military to control the border. The only reason the border is not closed currently is because Joe Biden and the Democrats do not want it to be. And this is important. He not only has that authority, but under Section 4, or Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution, he has the oath sworn duty to do exactly that. If Biden does not shut down the border, he is engaged in the commission of high crimes and misdemeanors by breaking his oath to faithfully execute the laws of the country and to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. Biden is committing a crime, high crimes and misdemeanors, by leaving the border open. That is inarguable. There is not an intelligent legal contrary position to make there. Biden is the one clearly acting illegally in this case. Now, when you look at what the Texas border agents are doing, they are clearly in the right. Again, because Article 4, Section 4 requires the president to secure the border. Article 1, Section 3, Section 10, paragraph 3. I may have that backwards, but it's in the first article. Article 1, Section 10, I think it is. It makes it very clear that the individual states do not have the authority to wage war, write treaties, and a few other things unless they are being invaded. The Constitution is very clear in this, right? The 10th Amendment reserves all authority and rights not explicitly enumerated within the text of the document to the federal government. It reserves those to the states and to their sovereign subordinate municipalities and to the people, right? Article 4 requires that the president secure the border and provide a Republican form of government to the states. In the failure of the president, no state would have signed on to ratify. Nobody would have ratified a constitution that says, hey, if we decide that the police just aren't going to show up, you're not allowed to defend yourself. You have to lay down your weapons and accept your death. Nobody would have ratified that. That's why we have a Second Amendment. The states absolutely retain the right to defend themselves from hostile foreign invaders in the absence of the federal government complying with their required duties. So where's the distraction? This idea that this bill that just failed in the Senate was somehow the thing that was going to solve the border crisis. It wasn't. The border crisis is ongoing and current. precisely because Joseph Robinette Biden, and I don't care what you say about, oh, well, he's not really running the thing, he's not competent. No. It is his name on the orders. Joseph Robinette Biden is not only failing to do his duty, right? It'd be one thing if we were talking about a president who was incompetent and just not doing a very good job and not giving out the right orders. He is giving orders that are explicitly contrary to his constitutionally mandated duty. His duty is to secure the border. He is sending federal agents to explicitly take actions to make the border less secure. He is going out of his way to facilitate the human trafficking that's occurring at the border. Joe Biden is currently the single biggest human trafficker on planet Earth, the single largest slave trader in world history. That is not a hyperbolic statement. That is a statement on pure numbers. And it's one that I am frankly amazed that we've arrived at. No single person in the history of the world has conducted and facilitated more slave trade than Joseph Robinette Biden, personally. And he's doing it right now, and he's using armed U.S. federal agents to conduct that operation. That's what's happening at this border. So, Stryker says going to examine if Biden actually drafted orders this go round. He did. He gave orders to the CBP agents to go to the border and remove the wire. Oh, and so I'm pretty much done with what I wanted to cover this morning. Let me get you some clarification on that too. You're going to see a lot of shit on social media for the next couple of days about how Texas. Oh, look at Republicans are all of a sudden they're all for defying the Supreme Court. Nobody's defying the Supreme Court here. Governor Abbott is not doing anything in defiance of the Supreme Court. Let's be very clear on this. The lower court determined that because of Article 4, Section 4, giving way to Article 1, Section 10, that Abbott was good to go and perfectly authorized, perfectly has the authority to put the security postures in position. He's totally cool to put up all the razor wire he wants to do. The Supreme Court stayed that order. 2 sentences. The Supreme Court said that Joe Biden has the authority to remove razor wire if he wishes to. What Abbott is doing down there, he's playing a careful game, but what he's actually doing is instead of stopping the Border Patrol from removing the existing razor wire, he's just got his National Guard down there putting in more razor wire. The court said Joe could remove the razor wire. They didn't say anything about Abbott not being allowed to put up more. So he's just going to run behind him. He's just going to run behind him with a spray bottle of Fabulosa while Joe Biden pisses on the border. It's like, well, I can't stop him, but I can clean up after him. That's what's going on. Texas is not defying the Supreme Court. It's not an opinion. That's what the fucking book says. That's, it's important to read these things. That's why it's important to define terms. Now, why is the Texas border thing a big deal? This is not going to be the thing that shuts down the election. I've seen some whispers of that, martial law, et cetera, et cetera. This is not going to be that because it's January. If this were happening in August or September, maybe. But they're going to have a hard time keeping up the pressure, keeping up the energy and keeping a head of steam all the way to close enough to the election to use something like martial law to shut down the elections. That's not going to happen. Now, I'm not saying there's not a circumstance under which Biden uses martial law to shut down the elections. I'm saying this ain't it. Because no matter how this situation breaks out, it resolves before we get to the election. Now, this will absolutely be an election issue. This will absolutely be a discussion that happens at the debates where Donald Trump gives a very clear and very exaggerated but pro-American vision of what border security looks like in a Donald Trump administration. And then Joe Biden shits himself and mumbles into the camera, and a bunch of random sociopaths clap for him as if he said something brilliant. Like the other day, gotta tell Donald Trump that you don't mess with American women unless you want to get the benefit. What? You don't mess with American women unless you want to get the benefit. Sorry, Joe. I think the most generous thing I could say is I don't follow. So recap. The deep state is not a reference to some conspiracy theory. It's a real thing. Refers to the unelected administrative state, which enjoys essentially interminable tenure. Don't let them distract you with nonsense where you get accused. Oh, you're one of those people that believe that the reptilians from V came down and took over the government. No, you shitbird. But it did kind of happen around the same time, which is cute. The word distraction does not necessarily mean that you're talking about some deep state or conspiracy agglomerated operation to cover up a piece of news. Sometimes it just means, Taylor Swift, okay, she's cute, but she's just not that important, and you need to be paying attention to what's going on in the world, right? Those are the two terms that I wanted to talk about the most this morning. But let me close you with conspiracy. Conspiracy isn't a word that has been redefined so much as it has suffered from a Russell conjugation, an artifact of Russell conjugation. The word has become synonymous with a particular type of conspiracy theory. Now, I've talked about conspiracy theories on this show quite a bit in the last several months or so, because we've seen over the last decade that conspiracy theories are just spoiler alerts. Turns out they're basically all true. Sort of. Now, there are some conspiracy theories that are just insane. And I like to hope that the reptilian conspiracy theory is one of those, that there's really not any credible, intelligible argument to be made for the reptilians thing, which, I'm going to have to do a whole show about that, because there are two branches of the reptilians theory. There's one that believes that all of a certain set of high important people, no, they both believe that all of the big important rich people are reptilians. One sect of those people believe that the reptilians are extraterrestrials, and one set believes that they're actually Dracula. Dracula was a dragon in human form that is the progenitor of the British royal line, and that's where all the reptilian stuff enters, and that's why the rich people drink baby's blood and buy adrenochrome. Dude, I'm gonna tell you this: they may be batshit crazy, but they are They are deeply entertaining, and that's worth talking about all by itself. We'll get back to that at another time. So, understand that words have meaning. And just because somebody says that black is white, night is day, good is evil, doesn't mean that they're right. In fact, it means that they either have a serious mental problem, or they are a particularly pernicious and evil brand of dishonest. Pay close attention to that shit. And don't let yourself be distracted. All right, that's all I've got for you this morning. Thanks for watching. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.